All right, sorry about that. So here we go. Lando, Contenta CMS, and Nuxt. So I've been interested in this headless Drupal problem, as many people are. And I had a tough time figuring out how to start, where to start, what things to use. So I just decided to lock it down and make some choices. And these are the choices that I made. So there's, I don't know, there's a lot of ways to put these pieces together. This is not the only way, but it's a way. Benji and I have been chatting. You're doing some Gatsby stuff in Drupal. He's got a Lando file that spins it up all together. This is going to be two different apps, a Drupal app and a Nuxt app. I'm Geoff. I'm an engineer at Tandem, and we make things on the internet. And I'm a maintainer of Lando and Backdrop CMS. I'm at Serendipity in a lot of places on the internet. So what are we going to cover? So I'm going to use Lando to manage all the local dev dependencies. There's a number of things that you have to have in play when you're using a JavaScript front end and Drupal back end. So you got PHP, you got Node, you got things going on. You don't have to use Lando if you are managing those things on your local machine with NPM or Yarn. That's totally fine. So Lando's going to get all these dependencies for me inside the containers for the app. So if I spin up a different app and I need a different version of Yarn, it's not going to affect this app. So that's part of the advantage of Docker in general. So we're using Lando to do that. So Lando's the dev infrastructure. Contenta CMS is Drupal. It's a distribution of Drupal. It's, I think, supported by Lullabot, but lots of smart people are working on this, and it packages all the. So you could go with straight Drupal and add in the modules you need, but this one does it for us. So it's got the JSON API module, Decoupled Router, and it's all packaged in there. And you just do a little bit of configuration, and you basically got your API out of the box, and then of course you need to make it do the things you want to do. We chose Nuxt.js as our Vue front end. Nuxt.js is a framework built on top of Vue.js. Nuxt is opinionated. And I was already making a lot of choices, so I embraced the fact that it had opinions, and it was like, do it this way, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it that way. You can do this, obviously, in just Vue.js. So part of the advantage of Decoupled is you can make these choices. You could swap out these things, but as a first go, I wanted to get a stack that I could get working. Use it. Just some things, if you're a PHP or Drupal developer, some things that you might not be super familiar with. I wasn't that familiar with them, but some things like routes I was familiar with from Laravel and Drupal 8. But async data was brand new to me. Axios I've heard of and played around with, but this was my first kind of full bore. If you're a PHP developer, you can kind of think of Axios like Guzzle, curl wrapper to make HTTP requests and get data from the back end. Okay, so the actual code that I'm talking about is up on GitHub. You can look at those things and pull them down and theoretically get them working the same as I have them working. If you're interested in playing around with that, those are the repos. Information. Okay, so the dependencies that we need to get this stuff running as we need Lando, we need Contenta CMS, and we need Nuxt.js. So that setup, I would guess, would take you, 40-ish minutes. There's a video here on how to do the setup that I've already done on my computer. If you're interested in that, you can walk through that video. There's a blog post. If you want to just read the text, that's fine. Or you probably just pull down the repos and get going of your own accord. All of those things are options. So what we have here are we're going to make two different apps. We're going to make the Drupal app, and we're going to make the Nuxt app. So these are two different .lando.yaml files, and there's nothing very special. The left one is just the Drupal Lando file, and it's just a Drupal 8 recipe, and that's it. That's all you need to run Contenta CMS. On the right, a little bit more stuff. We're not using a recipe there, so we're using a custom .lando.yaml file. So we give it a proxy. Services are the containers that we're going to define. So we have app server type node 10, and then when we start that container, we're going to do this yarn dev. So yarn is inside the container. I don't have to worry about having yarn on my machine. Install dependency, so it's going to do the yarn install to get all the node modules I need to make this thing work. And then I'm going to expose some tooling, so I'm exposing yarn so that I can use it via Lando. and exposing node and exposing Nuxt CLI. So all the tools are set up inside the containers there. Once you have those things, you just go to the place that you put those .lando.yaml files, cd to that directory, and do a lando start, and you will be starting the apps. So one thing to point out is this this last one. This is very helpful for debugging. So on the Nux side, if you run these logs and follow them, you can see what fails, and if your build fails, every time you change a file in Nuxt, it's going to do Webpack things and reload the app, and sometimes it's like, whoa, you did it wrong. And it will tell you what you did wrong so you can fix it. So usually I just leave a window running with that the whole time. So I'll just leave that running the whole time I'm developing. This is just, if you're using Lando, if you make a settings.local.php file, it can be convenient and tell it the Lando credentials to for your database connection and stuff. This doesn't matter at all for this presentation. If you're doing a migration from a D7 site, you can have that, but it has nothing to do with this. I should have took it out. All right, let's look at the things. So what we have here is this is the Drupal side, and it just has that .lando.yaml file that I was talking about. I put a little extra candy in there so that my drush will work the way I want it to, and it will know about the URL of the site. But this is just a nested web root I pulled down directly from composer command that's on the Contenta CMS GitHub repo. On the Nux side, how many people are familiar with Nux? No familiar? Okay, so we can go through like the directory structure and give you some idea. This .nuxt folder here is just the build app. So if you run yarn build, if you're like doing a static site generation, everything would be served from there. Assets are where you can put things that are going to persist across components and pages. Images, CSS, so forth. Components are the individual components of your application. So typically things like header, footer are going to go in here, and also components that maybe aren't on every page, but are on, say, events pages or something like that. So there might be. And layout is exactly what it sounds like. You might have one layout for events pages and a different layout for blog posts, and if that was the case, you would define those layouts here, and then in your pages, you tell it what layout to use. Middlewares, if you're doing like authentication stuff or redirecting stuff, you can put that in there. Node modules are the NPM dependencies. Pages. So one cool thing about Nuxt is like with Vue, there's the Vue router, and you define your Vue router file, and it defines the routes for your application. With Nuxt, it has this pages directory, and anything that you put in here, it creates the Vue router stuff for you. So once you have that, you have a route defined for your application. That's pretty simple, so that's nice. Plugins are, so if that's like custom modules. If you're going to write a custom JS plugin, you'd put it in there, load it into wherever it needs to be loaded. Static is another way to store static assets, which is images. The store is the Vuex store. Rob was asking me earlier, is there a way to persist data to make states? And that's how you do it in the Vuex store. I won't get into that today, but if you need to persist some data across page loads, that's how you would do it. Nux documentation, by the way, is pretty good, so it's easy to learn those things from their website. Nux Config JS. So this is like where we load in the Axios module. So if we load it in, you can load things in on the page level, but if you load it in here, the whole application has access to it. So like there's this global app variable. So once you have this, I can say app.axios anywhere in the application. Well, not anywhere, but globally I can. You can't really do that in components because they don't have like a way to do asynchronous data, but you can do it on the page level. Okay, so that's the structure. Any questions about the structure of Nuxt? Pretty straightforward. So I have both of these apps started, and we can take a look at the Drupal side here. So this is the Drupal backend, and I've just created 2 nodes, 2 blog posts, and it's gonna, so whenever you hit the API, it's gonna deliver this JSON data, so maybe it's better to see it via an API hit instead of a node hit. I need the UUID. So this is JSON API, so it follows the structure of /API / the entity you want to load, which is node in this case, the type of node, which is blog in this case, and then UUID, and you get this JSON object back. And that's the data that you're going to query from your front-end app and do things with on the front end. So that's provided by JSON API and Drupal. So now on the front end, what we have is a query back to this. So in Pages, I've made a blog directory and gave it an index file. And so here's where the magic happens, down in async data. Components is where you, if you were using any components, headers or footers, that's where you would load those in. The async data makes the call back to Drupal. So here we have the app global parameter, and then we define a variable, and we can wait for it. It's a promise, so we want to wait for it to be complete before moving on, because otherwise you won't have the data to render your page. So we got app.axios, and then we're making a get call. So this is similar to how you would do things with curl. We just have Axios with some syntactic candy to make the things happen for us. So what we have here is a hard-coded call back to the same page we were just looking at, API node blog UUID. And then we're taking the response, we're console.logging it. That's just for debugging. You wouldn't do that in your production application. And then we're going to return. So we can define whatever keys we want here, and then we're just pulling stuff out of the API requests. So res.data.attributes.title should match what we see here. This is the response, data, attributes, title. So
So why data.data?
Yeah, the Axios response puts everything in a data key, and Drupal has everything in a data key. So Axios has a data key, and then there's a Drupal data key, and then the stuff.
So data.
So Axios is injecting additional data there. One thing I learned recently from my colleague is if I do a Axios.$get, it kind of strips out some of that stuff, so that might be better. Maybe we can try it and see if it works, see what happens. I don't know if we're going to have the console.log or not, though.
Was that Mike or Dustin?
Dustin.
Who's going with
I heard it from Dustin. I don't know who did it first. Can we see data.data here? There's it past my buffer.
Do you know why you're using Axios as opposed to like Fetch?
Yeah, Axios is kind of seems like the go-to HTTP request module in the Node world. Seems very popular. Got a lot of like GitHub stars. Lots of people use it. And all the Drupal examples I was looking at, and particularly the Contenta CMS has different repos with different JavaScript front ends. They were not using Axios, and I was like, well, they're not using it, but it seems like the rest of the JavaScript world is, so that's the direction I went in, and it's working well for me, so I didn't really look back after that. And we've used it on other applications that Mike has built internally, so it was a known quantity to us, even though it was new to me, it wasn't new to our company.
There's data.
What's that?
There's
Oh, you got it. Yeah. So there's data. So let's change it to $get and see if Dustin knows what he's talking about. I think he does. But we don't have to trust him. We can science it, right? All right, so when you change that file, this does all the Webpack stuff. No errors there. That's good. Reload this page. Page doesn't look too happy, though. Oh, because now I have res.data.data, but the object is probably different now. Let's take a look. Oh, it errored on the page load. Oh, because it can't render title and stuff. But did it render the thing?
Yeah, it looks like it's stripped off the data.
There's another data down here, but I don't. This above one might be the. I have
Yeah, the above one looks
Yeah,
good.
that's the Drupal data.
in
Try removing data.
So here in Nux Config, in the Axios section, we have this debug, so that's spitting out stuff whenever Axios makes a request as well. And we have this console.log of the response here. So we're seeing 2 logs of that. Maybe I should just turn this off, but if you change this file, sometimes you have to rebuild the app, so I'm a little, I mean, I'm not nervous, it only takes a few seconds, but I don't know if you guys want to sit here and watch the app rebuild. So I think the one we care about is the bottom one. And that's just a single data key. So that should speak to your question, Benji, that it wouldn't be res.data.data anymore. We can try that. I mean, this is just, I guess this is a lesson in debugging if you want, but you have to debug, right? Did I do it?
Yeah. You could have said DW.
It did a thing. There we go. So now we don't have to have res.data.data. So if you don't want that extra layer of access stuff, use $get. And you'll get a simpler JSON response. Okay, so that's nice. That's good. We got data from Drupal, but it's kind of silly to hard code a UUID there. We just have a web application with one web page, and you can get this particular blog post, which we have asserted is the most important one. So there it is. So we want to be able to get more than one blog post. Oh, I wanted to close the other one. I should probably. Okay, so at the beginning we mentioned a Drupal module called Decoupled Router, and what that does is allows you to query by a path, and then it looks in Drupal in the places it thinks it should look for those paths. So instead of looking for UUID, we can look for a standard Drupal path that you would either just save on the node or create with path auto patterns, or however you want to do that. So what we've got now is so I checked out a different tag on this repo where I did some work, and I've added this new file under the blog directory _title. So in Nuxt, anytime you do underscore, that's going to be a variable that's exposed in the URL pattern. So anytime you visit /blog something, it's going to pass that information into _title route. So what we got up here is the same exact, I guess I skipped over the template section altogether, but whatever, that's just HTML. So every Nuxt file, every .view file has a template section, which is your HTML, a script section, which is your JavaScript, and then CSS at the bottom. Which I find nice, like it's kind of already scoping all your stuff and making them do a singular thing without any additional work from me. So what we've got now is we're passing into async data app params and the environment, and we got the app.axios call, and this time we're calling back to the decoupled router by path. So that this thing here, this params.title, is going to be everything in the URL after /blog. Nuxt is going to inject that information into this params variable for us, so we have access to it. And then we have a promise, so we're chaining together another promise and doing another Axios get call. So the decoupled router finds the thing that matches that path, the entity that matches that path, and then from that we extract the UUID and make basically the same call that you just saw back to that. So now we can dynamically, via URL patterns, get all of our blog posts. So here's blog post 1, and if we get the path to blog post 2, how do I get to, is it admin content? Looking for path. There it is.
You could also get that from the URL.
What's that?
You could also get that from the URL.
Oh, right. That would have been easier, wouldn't it? So there we have data from the other node. So from there you can extend this to lots of things. You know, make a list page if you query back to a collection. So if we just go to on the Contenta CMS side, so if we made a query to API node blog without any UUID, that gives you a collection. Oh, I don't have the count on, but so here's one node, and then here's the other node, right? So that gives you a collection. So I only have 2 nodes on the Drupal backend, so it gave me a collection of all the blog posts. So obviously you can make a list page that way. That list contains the UUIDs. You could link through to the individual blog posts, similar to like a views type scenario. So all this can be extended out in that way. So that's what I got. That's the infrastructure. Drupal backend, Nuxt.js frontend. Shortish, but I'm glad to chat about it or to have questions, whatever. Yes?
The 2 Axios calls. One is to resolve the alias to get the UUID so that you can, so you have to make 2 HTTP requests to get it from one path to the other.
Yep.
And what provides that? Is that is that dynamic routing?
This part is
Yeah.
provided by Decoupled Router Drupal module.
Okay.
So this allows you to make the lookup by a path string, and it tries to find something that matches that either in the path table or wherever it thinks to look. And then once you have that, you have the same object that we were looking at, the res.data stuff, and then we tack on the same call that was in the first version of this file to the UUID. There's another module, forgot what it's called, but it allows you to combine all these HTTP requests so that you don't have to make too many HTTP requests to slow down your application. We had some problems with it, so maybe it's a little buggy. Maybe it was us, maybe both, not sure. So we ended up going with this because it's not that many HTTP requests and it wasn't slow. So
In theory, that'd be cached anyway.
right, if we haven't really, this is our first decoupled project that we're doing. We haven't really figured out caching yet, but we're toying with a lot of ideas like cache on the Drupal side, cache on the front end. Where is this stuff going to be? How are we going to do it? But yeah, if it's cached.
I think Axios has built in, like it's capable of doing caching on its own.
Yeah, yeah,
On the client side, and then of course that would be cached on the Drupal side too.
yeah.
I was just curious what that templating language is at the top of this file, the B call, B row.
Oh, that's Vue.
Okay.
So like these curly brackets are the things that I've defined down here that from this return. So I have a title and a body, so I have access to those in the template. You can add in other stuff, you know, if I wanted to expose the path, whatever. So this stuff is bootstrap stuff. B call is bootstrap. And then this VHTML is a data bind. So some of the Drupal backend stuff has raw HTML in it. So you have to tell Vue that I'm willing to accept this raw HTML. So like we trust the people who are the admins on the backend that the HTML they're going to put in is not like cross-site scripting stuff. And the other thing that you'll see in Vue is like if I wanted to bind something to data, I could do like :href. And that would dynamically bind the data to the stuff that's coming in from async data or data function. I didn't show you any data function. I only used async data, but you could also use a data function. And then there's a a fetch function, which is also asynchronous, which you would use if you wanted to grab stuff and put it into the Vuex store and have it processed. Like sometimes we were trying to extract a page title out of the page component and into the header component, so we can put it in the Vuex store, grab it out of there into the header section, not display it in the content section, and have it work that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Chat amongst yourselves. Go get fake coffees.
So go back to what you said a minute ago. We trust our admins.
Yeah.
Not to put cross-site scripting
Yeah.
into the body field.
Admin's the wrong word, like content editors. So the client has content editors, and they're going to create content. And
So that is not the strategy that Drupal usually adopts.
yeah, they have the filters where they.
So what would it take to get Drupal to filter the body text and you use the filtered version?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to go about that. I think in the.
And can you summarize the question for the recording?
Oh, yeah, if I can remember it. Drupal uses text filters to not spit out things that are potentially cross-site scripting. And the question is, how hard would it be to run the data through those things before we send it off to Nuxt, so that we wouldn't have to worry about the HTML. We could just pipe it in with the curly brackets. So let's see, attributes. Okay, so they have this like body process, and I'd have to check that, but I think that might be the thing that you're asking about. So if I use that instead of body, I think that's the thing that goes through the Drupal filters that strips out the stuff. And yeah,
Script tag in there.
throw a script tag in there.
You gotta throw a
Oh,
script tag in your,
you know any good ones?
Script alert, script alert.
Admin. What was the path? Was it two?
Admin/content.
I think the other thing going on there too is, even if you trust that Drupal is filtering this stuff correctly, you also have to be trusting that the API call is going to the right place.
Yeah.
Just like that you trust.
The actual site that we're working on has a lot of data from D7, and they already have HTML in there, so thousands and thousands of pieces of content that are already expecting that kind of HTML. So that's the path we went with that. Like, it's already trusted on the current site. We're going to trust it on this new site as well. So what did you want me to do? Throw a script tag in here?
yeah, if you switch it off basic HTML, or is it?
I think you wanted that basic
You wanted that
HTML.
basic,
Yes.
that's
The
good.
point is that we want to see if Drupal actually filters it or not.
Alert.
Alert.
Greetings from your friendly hacker.
How do you do alert? Just parentheses?
Yeah.
API, node. Oh, I don't know the UUID. Which one did I do it on?
Which one was that?
Reload, see which one's updated.
Process.
Yeah, that's just right
So it did some stuff to that text. So might not display very nicely to your users, but at least it didn't inject the script. But I guess what we really want to do is visit that page and see if it alerts. Tube louder. Uh-oh. So there's your answer to the to whether we can trust
It's
process
only
or not.
script out in the display.
Yeah.
Not the Contenta
Yeah.
front end.
Yeah.
So now go back to your Contenta.js, was it, and see if you can just change data.value to data.processed or something.
Oh, right. We didn't use process. You're right. That matters. Process, right?
Yes.
Like that. Compiled. Yay! So that was it. It did take it out. We just didn't update our application to call it a process queue. Yeah. So that's
Good to know.
yeah. very good. Anything else?
I guess the other thing with that is if you had like media references or something like that, anything in embed
Yeah.
is like a token essentially, and if you didn't use process, you wouldn't actually have that media embedded, you would have the token.
Yeah, when we if you embed media via Drupal 8, it comes out fine when you do data.processed. I'm sorry, body.processed. But the stuff that was migrated from Drupal 7 wasn't the same kind of media object, so it has like this embedded JSON stuff. So on the migration side, we had to, when it was migrating those nodes, grab that and regex it to Drupal 8 style. There was code available, you know, when we Googled, like people have done this, so we just had to tweak it for our purposes, so it wasn't too bad, but it was scary at first. It was like, oh boy.
What could go wrong when processing HTML and regex?
Yeah, so fortunately it's one time on the migration that it happens. It's not like on every render that we're doing that, but still, things could go wrong.
We should do that. We have a client that's been since Drupal 5. They're using the image module.
Mhm.
They had square bracket image of that text that we had to create Drupal 8 media interface with.
Yeah.
Same thing, man.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a little regex.
I don't know. I have a good DOM document now. Just like parse it, like let the PHP like parser process it as HTML and rewrite it however you need.
These are square text. There's not even like angle brackets. It's like
Oh yeah.
square
It-
fit equals.
Yeah, it puts some JSON into the
Oh, and J, yeah.
in the body of the node, or whatever field you're. All right.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah.